This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And I am beyond excited to introduce to our global community today someone that I've actually known since the dawn of time. This is Bill Boorman. And Bill was actually the person responsible for training little old me back in the 1990s when I first started my recruitment career at an amazing company at the time called Primetime Recruitment. And I have been dying to get Bill on our podcast because he has got so much experience to share with us. So without further ado, welcome to you today, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to talk to you. It actually feels kind of strange because we haven't seen each other for quite a few years, but it feels like it was the other week, really. So
I know.
It's great to be talking to you. Enjoy your podcast. I've enjoyed watching the various directions your career's gone and where you've gone from those early days in Birmingham. So it's great to be here.
You actually saved me from quitting. I don't know if you actually know this. I don't know if I've ever told you this before, but when I came on your training course, I'd already done 3 months. And I was on that brick wall that so many newbies listening will be going, I don't know if I can do this. And I was about to quit. And we then did the residential in Northampton. And your training, I still refer back to your training, and I'm sure we'll come on to this. And it totally transformed me, which is why for me, an endemic training and development program is so essential for newbies coming into recruitment. But I'm sure
it's key. But I think that point you make is a really common story. So lots of people tell me that who've actually become prolific recruiters in their career. And I was always one of saying, when people were sent to me for training and I was told that they were an absolute superstar and they were going to make it, I kind of knew that they were probably going to, if they were finding it really easy, they were probably going to fail and be unsuccessful in a relatively period of time. And I think that's true all the way through your career, like, where you take on your first branch manager's job or whatever it might be. If you don't struggle and really have to work at that, and you do question your own capability, and you do question whether you can do it, you have to dig very deep. When it appears to come easy, those people tend not to be successful. And though, lots of people I know who own recruitment companies now or were directors, Primetime and other places, were actually either a week away from quitting or a week away from getting fired, and circumstance, and a few things go your way. So anyone listening in who's finding it tricky or hard, that's good. That's good. This is, that bodes well for your career.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I just want to say, I will definitely be sending this episode to the cohort we talked about off camera, who were, they were my true peer group. They were at a similar stage, and they have become exceptionally successful business leaders themselves. And I think that at one point in time, they've probably been sacked or we're about to leave. You have to hit brick walls, and I know we're going to come on to that. And let's just talk a little bit about your profile. So as we record this in 2022, what are you doing? And talk to us a little bit about
so I've worked in recruiting for 40 years. I started at 16. First day I left school and got a job in an agency, right? And that was going to be a temporary thing, and then I'm still around. So my career really falls into 3 stages, if we want to call it a career. The first part was all geared around agencies, which culminated in the longest job that I had. I was with Primetime for 12 and a half years. I would say I never regret a day that I was there. I was there at exactly the right time. I also never regret a day that I've left. So it's kind of, it's a strange one. But I did 12 and a half years there ultimately as director of training, and went through a whole growth from kind of about 6 offices to about 160 or something. So, introduced was responsible for rolling out the very first computer system that we had and moving people on paper. Lots of things happened during that period of time, like the first national accounts, the first time we needed a brochure. I had to learn to do a brochure. I ended up taking on a bit of HR and going to tribunals. It was a real growth and discovery. Anything when the first national account started out, before there was a national accounts team, I was working on kind of proposals and the first RFIs that came in, all this kind of stuff. So it was a great discovery time, and it was a very good, a massive focus and belief in bringing new people into the industry. And I think probably when I look across the industry, you know, there are 100+ people who own recruitment companies that I've trained at one point or another. I came out of that and then set up a training company, really, and it pretty much just had another job, really, although my name was above the door, but there was 5 of us working together.
Yeah.
You'll know, obviously, David Morris and Jackie,
Yeah,
were working for me at that time. And we had 4 great years and 1 terrible one when the recession came along.
yeah.
That came along, basically lost everything, so went bankrupt from that, and personally bankrupt. Was spending way too much money at the time and living the champagne lifestyle with houses all over the place. And then social media had just started, right? So it was just really the beginnings of time with Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. And I really got engrossed in that, and I won a whole load of awards for Hard Rock Cafe. I launched the first ever recruiting campaign on Facebook, where we hired 120 people in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Did that, and then that took me to the BBC and Oracle and a whole bunch of people, and I became essentially setting up and being strategic around social recruiting, which has then led to branding and lots of other things. Yeah. And then from that, it's kind of, I set up my own community through the Recruiting Unconference, where we have about 100 events a year globally, normally in normal times. It's an open source event.
I've done both. I've done real ones, and I've done the virtual ones as a track leader a few times with Martin. Shout out to Martin Dangerfield.
Yeah. So we set up True, but that's open source, so anyone can run it. You know, there's no fees, no licenses. A certain way that we do it. That built a big community.
Right.
And in normal times, I would spend about 7 months of the year speaking at all of the major technology events. I work with startups and VCs and investors, and large-scale global organizations. People like Naspers or Oracle will come to me for their strategy and buying technology. So it's kind of interesting. I've just finished a project with a nursing agency to completely automate the whole end-to-end recruiting process for nursing, including the marketing and sales and that kind of thing. So I still have, and I've just been asked to do some training again, actually do some management. Somebody messaged me out of the blue and said, "I'm there, you know, I remember you from like 20 years ago and you trained me, so can you, I just want you to train my people." I'm just about to do a little bit of that again, which is kind of interesting. So I just work in the space, and then post lockdown, my consulting business takes less and less hours, and I've been spending between 50 and 70 hours a week working with the homeless on quite a real problem, which has been, and that's gone from the first lockdown. We did 122 straight days. I cooked dinners and took them out every night. We did about 6,500 meals out of my kitchen.
Wow.
It became like industrial.
That's amazing.
Then started working with the little charity, the Drop-In Centre, volunteered there every day for a year. Then now we pick up sovereign beds, and I actually I have to work for the council because I can't be a volunteer there to get access to all the records. I work with the council running the winter night shelter. And we've taken homeless from about 150 or so in the beginning to what's a handful now, 4 or 5 people.
Oh, that's amazing, Bill.
It's been very rewarding.
I was just about to say that, talk about altruism, and the fact, and this is why I wanted you on the podcast, and the reason that you needed to do your intro is because I can't think of anybody else who has got the depth and breadth of experience as you. You were doing social recruiting before it was even a thing. I vividly remember that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the point is, when we talk about careers, you've got new people, you've got some old hands. My advice to people is not to have too much of this strategy and career plan, right? I've never had a strategy. I don't necessarily know what it is I'm going to be doing tomorrow or next week, but I be very reactive to what situation is as your market opens up, as things unfold. Be very reactive to what's going on. Don't be frightened to do stuff and know that some of it's going to fail. Learn quickly, learn the essential things that you need to learn, right? And there's a lot more access to that, to routes to do that. So go and learn things, make sure you've got just constantly building your network, right? Your network's never big enough, and don't build a business network, build a network, and that's two very different things. I think you need to make a decision when you go out. One of my Bill's life lessons, if you like, try and communicate with people, is you have to make a decision of am I building a network to make money from my network or because of my network? And I think in the agency world, we're always very focused on building a network you're going to make money from. Everything had to have a purpose or a very clear, this is a candidate, this is a client, go to this event because you're going to meet lots of people, potential candidates or potential clients, and behave in that way. Whereas I think in the current age, it's you just broaden your network because you don't know where it's going to take you or where opportunities come. Just be very easy to reference, have a good profile, make sure people can see what you can do, and just contribute to the networks and the communities that you're in without expectation of any return.
Absolutely.
And that's the major change, I think, from the period of time that we were going through recruitment agency. You'll remember me, it's very, very focused on outcome and activity and numbers and blah blah blah, and that made people very successful at that time. And now I think you have to network without purpose.
Well, you have to network with authenticity, and I think it's all about seeing the bigger picture.
And authenticity is always the one that makes me laugh, right? Because whenever I hear people talking and say you need to be authentic, but this is how you need to present your personal brand, right? So this is the way you need to be, and you're like, yeah, but that's not actually
not authentic.
I'm not that thing, right?
No.
So I think you do. And you'll remember me being kind of the suited person. I never wear a suit. I always wear a hat. And I go into lots of boardrooms at places like KPMG and the BBC or whatever. They're very corporate environments. So they just know. They get a message from me saying, if you want me to wear a suit, then I'm not
coming.
I'm not showing. We better make it a phone call. Now I'm in a fortunate position that I'm able to do that. That is a luxury. I can set those terms and say, if you want to talk to me, this is what you want to do, because people don't tend to ring me when they don't have a problem.
No, of course not.
And it's a very real problem, and they haven't tried a number of people to try and fix that problem. But you have to be, when we talk about being authentic, I think it's just being truthful and not being frightened, and not expecting everyone to like you as well. That's
I'm glad you've said that point, because I think I'm a bit of recruitment marmite, which I don't care about. I mean, I've earned the stripes like you. I've been doing this a long time. I think when you get to a certain age anyway, but I definitely think that what social media as a culture has allowed us to see is that it's continuity and it's consistency, and you're not going to please everybody. And when I
go and do the things, right? These are I did a talk recently for our L100 for recruiting leaders down in Whitstable, which lots of people really liked, and I was talking about extreme networking, which I'm going to make a video series about actually, but extreme networking. And I was talking about how I built a network. Right, so basically, I think the time that I've spent with the homeless, my time, all of my years in recruiting, kind of prepared me for that moment in time. It's kind of like a perfect story. Because it is entirely built about networking, and the way in which you network and establish trust is exactly the same. You consistent, you turn up, you do the things that you say you're going to do. When you can't do the things you say you're going to do, you go and put your hands up to it. If it's out of your capability, you don't help. You're very honest with people. Sometimes you're delivering them you know, and I have to deliver news to people that they're not going to get the house that the room they were hoping for, and there's a reason for that. You know, I have to deliver bad news as well as good news in all kinds of situations, but you have to be consistent, reliable. You have to turn up, do the things you're going to do, and you have to understand that you're going to do a lot of giving before you start getting any receiving, right? Before it starts coming back. And I think that applies. You know, they are the things that I've learned, kind of golden rules from networking. You know,
definitely true. If I think back to networking, even after I left prime time, you know, you went with. I'm sort of going back and summarising some of the things you've said. You'd go to a networking event with a target of, I'm going to get 3 new clients from this meeting. And now if you did that, I mean, we're doing it in a virtual community, generally speaking, it would just be so disingenuous to what you're actually trying to achieve. I think
you're just not a member of that community, right? So I remember when I started before podcasts were a thing. I used to have an internet radio show for a year, right? When this thing started, and it was a dial-in thing, and it was going on in America, and I had the first one in the UK. And I remember one of the first episodes, I had a whole bunch of people, some of whom were recruiters, some of them weren't, but had really valuable things to put in. They might come from digital agencies, recruitment, marketing, or whatever. And I said, right, and we were talking about LinkedIn groups in those days, because that was really the only. This was before Facebook groups. Scratching your head saying, was there before Facebook? But it was kind of LinkedIn groups was the place, right, where you had a group and you behaved in it, and you started the first community. And they said, right, the one way that you kill a group on LinkedIn is to invite recruiters. and kind of that really stuck with me. And rather than being defensive about it, I kind of went, yeah, tell me about that. And they said, well, look, you know, they're showing up first thing. So I made a video about that for Social Talent, which actually has been my biggest connection. It's I think the most watched video on Social Talent, and it's about what there's one bit on personal branding, but there's a bit on networking, and I compare it to lessons from the pub, right, which is where I learned all my networking, which is if you go into that environment, if I tell you if you hire accountants, and I tell you, right, the Rose and Crown has accountants night every Wednesday night where accountants get cheap or free drinks, then you're going to want to turn up on a Wednesday night. If you turn up and walk in and say, right, who wants a job? I'm here, I'm a recruiter, who wants a job? Then they are going to say, yeah, go and talk to Jim over there. He hasn't been employed for 5 years, but you can help him with his CV or something like that. Whereas what you do is you go in and you'd find a common ground. You go and find a common ground, you know. And I think a lot of those rules from the pub really set up the rules of networking. Lessons for life that I taught my kids, like, you know, don't divide the bill at the end of a meal. Just split whatever it is and put in. Don't add up what you've had. You know, so don't go. And what I mean by that is don't go into these situations looking for what have people done for me before I do stuff for them.
Really good advice, that. And you know, for those who are
just be open. And we call it the Bank of Replicity, basically. In that it's you put in, and then when you put in enough, people will come to you, right? And everyone wants to buy and nobody wants to be sold to. That's the world that we live in. And everybody wants to buy from someone they are familiar with or have heard of or know something
and they
about.
trust. And how do we trust? It's through building up a relationship, and to do that through social media.
Just being consistent and help people where you can, and don't help people with an expectation that there's going to be anything at the end of that, right? And then when people want to work with you or have a requirement to work, as long as it's really clear what you do, when people have a requirement to work for you or they need some advice or they need something, whether that's hiring someone or whether that's doing something, then they're going to ring you because they don't want to ring other people, or they're going to send you a direct message or do, you know, go on WhatsApp or follow whatever format they do now, because people are going to come to you because they know who you are. And it's kind of like 80% of the work you do generates you no money. It generates you 20% that pays all the bills, right?
Well, based on that, if we've got recruitment leaders listening, which we do, how do they balance that with the fact that they still need their recruiters to generate revenue? We're not cancelling out.
How you believe in generating revenue, right? So if I was running a recruitment company today, if I own one today, and I still do some recruiting, the charity I'm a trustee of, I've just hired 4 people for them last week. I'm still, it hasn't changed so much. I can't still get the tools out, and they actually said to me, "Yeah, you're quite good at this." I said, "Yeah, I've kind of done it before. I'm okay." And I think that the point of that is, if you believe ultimately in network or not work, if you buy that principle, I'm just about to run this training course for a group of IT recruiters. If you believe that, I would have recruiters networking at least 2 hours a day, with no expectation of reporting how many candidates they spoke to or what they did, right? I'd come in the morning and look for conversations that are happening that I can contribute to in the groups, in the social places where I am, whatever I'm doing. Is anyone looking for some help with something that I can contribute to, whether that's advice, they want me to have a look at something, somebody needs to call. So I would network I would intentionally network with no expectation of return at least 2 hours a day. Right? Go in and do those things. And I don't really care where that networking is. That networking could be in your local community group of whatever it is. Go and do stuff because you're going to learn stuff, and you're going to get sources of information. You're going to be able to connect people. The technology companies I work with love it, and I always say to them, look, this is how it is. This is how it is. We're going to go to a conference. I don't want you to pitch anyone. I want you to absorb all the conversations that are going on and learn about your market, because these people are teaching you for free. You should, they're teaching you for free, right? That's probably why I don't run a training company anymore. These people are teaching you for free. So just go and absorb all these different points of view, all these different angles.
But if you're a recruitment company, what we're doing for the other 8 hours a day? If we're doing that for 2 hours, what we're doing for the rest of the time? Are we still cold calling?
What do you do for the rest of the time? Well, it depends what you describe as cold calling, really. Right? It depends what you describe as cold calling. But I mean, for me, for me, and people don't answer the phone unless they know you, right? So it really is this reputation building, contributing, looking for where you can be helpful for people, and doing that, right? And that will generate work hard and surprise people. We used to do something, and I still hold by this, and I think this is the major difference between recruiting, if you want to say, when I started out and up to when the internet came along and all that kind of thing, before fax machines and all that sort of thing. As recruiters in agencies, our purpose was to find jobs for people, not people for jobs. And that's significantly different, right? So our job was to have a small number of candidates who I mean, I only used to be allowed 4 candidates when I started out, right? That was we didn't have a database. They sat in my drawer. And I had to make sure nobody came along and nicked one. I was only allowed 4, and attraction was very expensive, advertising in papers and stuff. And we would work on who are the people, and then work those people. And if you remember kind of some of the fundamentals that I always pushed into recruiters, it was doing that. It was reaching out. It was giving contacts that we have in the market the opportunity to say no. It's like, look, I'm telling you, they've come up. There's a reason for always having a reason for connecting with someone.
Yeah, of course.
And, we might call it a call. It might be a LinkedIn message. It might be a WhatsApp message. It might be whatever format it is. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's it's constantly building a network. So you can just go out to people and say, look, I'm just telling you that I'm giving you the option on this. In the same way as you go back to candidates and say, I'm giving you the option on this.
Yeah.
And being really open.
I find that really, I didn't know that. That's coming, obviously, it's a long time since you trained me, but I think I just want to pause because, of course, that's my entire model. And that has been my model for 20 years. That I get a candidate, I wrap them
I
up.
dripped it in your ear for a week and said, "This is what
Well,
we're doing."
clearly it did, but it works. And to me,
Yeah.
most of the people listening to this, whether they're sitting on the recruiter side or the leader side, you will be in a talent short market. And in order to ensure that you are placing the best talent into your clients, which is then delivering to both, is doing it this way. This is
But it doesn't really matter whether you're in a talent short market or a market overflowing with talent. Right? You still essentially have the same problem, which is how do we get to the right person?
Yeah,
You've got a talent short market. It's harder to get to those people and build that stuff up, and relationships are key. If you've got a market overflowing with candidates, and I've been through all of those cycles multiple times. If you've got lots and lots of candidates in the market, it's harder and harder to get to the right ones because there's so many people. All your time is spent kind of, you put an ad out and you get 240 people reply. It's easy.
Never happened to me.
Yeah, so
job board. So that I find that really interesting. I do, and I think you are the king of pivot, if you don't mind me saying. Given that at the start of this episode we talked about how your career has sort of transformed and you've evolved, and I love how pragmatic you've talked about.
Although I don't think I've ever pivoted,
No, but you have.
I think I've just done the same thing in a different space.
Yeah, okay.
With a different angle, because whether that's networking, it's identifying opportunities, it's learning very quickly about those opportunities, looking for other people who might want that opportunity. So I don't think of myself as being any different to how I was. I've just done it in lots of places. I don't have I have a hunger to I was always, when I started out in recruiting, one of the areas I got to very quickly was I built desks for someone I worked for who's actually still is godmother to my children. Was the first person to get it. Sacked me 3 times. Twice I deserved it. Once I still hold it against them. But the things that what I used to do is I'd open a desk. And this was when all agencies were general. There was no specialist like sales recruitment or anything else. And I lived through that period of time where I would go, okay, well, I've got a couple of candidates who are quite good, and they might be corporate finance secretaries is one that really sticks out in my mind. So I'd market them out. Because I'd market them out, they were good candidates, they get hired. I'd get 10 jobs for corporate finance secretaries. So then I put myself in the market as the corporate finance secretary specialist, right? And then that ended up being a massive few agencies that made several £1 million a year in revenue, when several £1 million was a lot of money. It's unusual. But as soon as it got to the point where we'd hired a couple of people to run it, and it had a machine, it had like that machine where it was going on, I needed to go to the next project because I'm not someone who, that's why I'm still a one-man business. That's why I don't own a company.
No, but you enjoy your projects, aren't you? That's what you enjoy.
I like building, and I like stuff I don't know. I like being in territory I don't know.
I understand that.
I
was leading you with my question though, because a lot of recruiters might be sat who are probably doing, they love recruitment, but maybe they're thinking about shifting their career, and you are the ultimate person that has done that. But I like what you just said there, because to me, if you've recruited in corporate finance, you could go and recruit in legal, you could go and recruit in risk and compliance, you could go and recruit. What would your advice be if people are looking to maintain their value? Because I think this is always the dilemma that someone has certainly when they come to me, they don't want to lose their value financially by leaving behind one sector and going into another one. But to me, recruitment is recruitment.
The only value you have in that respect is your black book, right? It's your contact.
Yeah, of course it is.
That becomes a currency that people move you around, and they have a certain expectation. But that also becomes a ball and chain.
Yeah.
That becomes a ball and chain. Whereas if it's your ability to go wherever you want to, you think about it. We looked at one time at prime time. I was teaching people how to do PCB assembly line in Wales, because that was the big market. And I went and learned about how to do PCB assembly. And I built an assessment system that people will be proud of these days. And we went and had thousands of temps going in and doing that, because we create and hired lots of people to do it. We built a way of doing that. We decided to start doing nurses and healthcare. We went and didn't have the internet in those days. Went to the library and read some books and wrote some healthcare training, and went to see some clients. Just went to see clients and just asked very open questions.
That's
you
it.
don't know anything.
That's it,
Right?
isn't it? It's about being inquisitive, and I think if you're
I think it's being inquisitive, but I also think it's genuinely, it's a blessing for me that I was born with this. It's genuinely being nosy and interested. If you start telling me, if you start telling me about how your mic works for your podcast, I'll be genuinely interested in that and ask you quite a couple of questions. That's kind of, yeah. But then if somebody brought, and this is what I think we do in recruiting is the best approach you can have is to be it's to not know everything about something, but a little bit about all the things, enough to have a conversation and good enough to say, you know what, just tell me about that. How does that work? What does that do? How do you
we can't know everything about everything, can we?
What are your thoughts? How do you feel about that? And I haven't changed in that in anything that I've done, any pivot I've done, any customer, all the different new markets. I've just gone in and said, let's be really diagnostic. Let's go deep. Now I use lots of data, lots of numbers all the time. Now I do lots of performance management. Still, essentially, recruitment companies are run a recruitment. That doesn't matter whether it's corporate or agency.
If you're asking those questions,
RPO that hires millions of people a year, still run on the same three numbers that are important. There's still the same three key factors: activity, efficiency, outcome. Right? If you understand that and you measure that data and you build your systems to measure that data, it's about spotting the trends. And I think we were really fortunate, actually, in the time that we went through, because we used to collect lots of numbers and what people would call data now before it was a thing. You'll remember I designed like a book for you to record all your 5-bar gates, all the calls you made, all the CVs you sent out and stuff like that. But it was always about not about hitting you over the head for what you haven't done, but get you to understand what impacts your business and making sure that everyone could understand, well, actually, I can either do more activity or let's really think about how I can improve that activity, because I can't do more work, but I could do better work.
You could be more efficient, because
I could go and get more money, right? Activity results, right? So whatever I do now, if I go to a company like Naspers, who might hire, I think when I was at Cisco, we were talking about hiring 1.6 million people a year or something like that globally. And I'm going in, I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking at numbers and saying, right, what's the activity? How many candidates do we need in this pool? Let's start breaking down what they need to do, how many convert, how many get interviewed, where have we got a hole in the process, what doesn't go on. So I don't think that I haven't really changed. Now the difference is now I have systems that can go and get me those numbers.
It's readily available. Of course it is.
Advice I'd give to anyone in recruiting, seasoned or old, is because the systems can do it, doesn't mean it should necessarily do it. There's good times for you to take those numbers and sit with a calculator and get a pen out and just see all time consuming. Because the two things that I found always were good in a management perspective, moving on, was because I had to collect the numbers. Let's say I was managing your office in Birmingham for the day or whatever, because I had to collect numbers from you, we had to have a conversation about those numbers. So you would tell me things and I would have a natural reaction. You say, oh, I've sent out 10 CVs today or whatever. I go, oh, right, that feels a bit low because you normally send out 20. You'd say, oh, yeah, but I had 3 client meetings and I was at the office for half the day. And I go, okay, I've got a handle on what you're doing now.
So it's understanding to
actually have a conversation. Yeah, and the sitting down working it out for myself before we sat down and had our evening debrief, kind of, I still believe in morning meeting, lunchtime catch up, evening debrief. Even more so now, people are disconnected, right?
I agree. It's process, isn't it? That's what it is.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's happened and what's going on, and let's look at individual stuff. So I don't think the way in which I've worked, albeit it's in lots of different environments, I still do the same things with homeless. Morning meeting,
I think some of the recruiters like Matt have been very good at process management, and so therefore it is easy for them, or easier for them, to maybe think about that. So I think that's all really useful. I think it doesn't matter where you're listening to this in the world, you can take that on board and really think about how you use your data.
It's basics, right? Recruitment comes down to the same thing. The same thing. There are two things which are absolutely critical, no matter what you hire, and that doesn't matter whether you're dealing with industrial temps, whether you're dealing with healthcare workers, or you're dealing with CEOs of organizations. It really doesn't. It is a good understanding of the job and a good understanding of the candidate. And also looking at those two things individually and collectively, of not being biased by that, to just say, right, let's ask the questions. More importantly, let's listen to the answers. You've got two ears, one mouth stuff, really. Let's listen to the answers.
I'm so glad you said that. I quote you all the time, and I'm always tagging you on LinkedIn. I just
make me right.
Two ears, one mouth. Use them in that order. I mean, I've never
in that order, right? And that nowadays that might be digitally. That might not be what we'd consider a conversation. That might, but same thing. Look at what people are telling you, and the answers that you're getting are getting shorter and shorter because of the technology, whether that's text or WhatsApp or whatever people are using. So, but you've got to make it. But what's important is not the first question that you ask, but the third question that you ask about the same thing. That's how you understand it.
Probing.
So if you understand the job, and you understand the people, then those two things overlap, right? Because you're asking them both, and I've always trained recruiters the same way. You're asking the same things to the same people. It doesn't matter whether they're hiring, doesn't matter whether they're looking for a job. And when those answers overlap, there's a match. And when they don't overlap, it's not a match. If you're trying to force that, because you're chasing
gold off, Bill. It's brilliant.
Right? Not going to work. And a good match, increasingly, it's you need to control the process, but don't think you can control the person.
No.
Because it's humans making decisions.
Yes, right? And the sooner you learn that, the better. Oh, these are gold nuggets. These are real nuggets.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you've got no deals or 10 deals in a month. Don't let the deal be your gold.
No.
Chasing that, just if this is a natural match, great. If not,
don't force it.
Get on and do something else.
Do the right thing. Listen to this man. Before we go, I've got one question for you. Have you got your crystal ball ready? Because you are the ultimate sort of future proofer. What's the one thing recruiters need to do to ensure that they still have a job in the future?
Make sure they still have a job, right? So here's the thing. If you work like a robot, you're going to be replaced by a robot. It's as simple as that. You think about it, I've just built a totally automated workflow for attracting clients, for everything from marketing to where messages should be going to, what's going on, through to conversational AI, to sourcing candidates, to reaching them all. Everything can be automated. So you got to look at it and say, I need to be different to that. The first thing I'd say is embrace technology, right? I think we fear it. Systems match candidates to jobs much better than people do on a much bigger, faster scale, right? I've helped build some stuff. So let the technology work and then use that. Automate everything you can. That's about 70% of your workflow, 70% of your tasks. Automate everything you can. And look at it and say, my piece in this whole thing is going to be 10%.
Yeah.
So my 10% could be really good. The 10% human piece, which we want in there, is all about the things like the relationship, the understanding of the people, the conversation, the nuance of what's going on.
Intuition, influence. Advice.
Make sure if it's influence with the right motive.
Absolutely.
It's not influenced because it's because but then if if the trust is there, you don't need control. You don't need control because people will tell you that they don't want to do something, or and if you're getting lots of people ghosting you or lots of deals not happening or whatever, that's an indication that you're pushing the wrong things.
Yeah, I agree. You'll get found out soon enough, that's for sure. You won't be around as long as this man. Thank you so much for joining us today. I knew it would be just like, how many sound bites we're going to get from this? Shannon's going to have a work cut out doing this, I tell you. But you have been a delight, and thank you to.
It's always lovely. It's always great to talk to you. And to anyone listening who's my old prime timers or whatever. I've no doubt you could also. I was thinking about this earlier. I thought I still know the policy statement. I expect people to still do that. I expect people to learn that. So, that tip to everyone. And enjoy, stay safe, and the biggest thing is enjoy it.
I agree.
It's not a chore. Finding people work and connecting people work is a privilege. And it's been the privilege of my lifetime.
Oh, I've just gone all goosebumpy, Bill, because that's exactly how I feel about what I do. And if we can just share that, how to achieve true joy in your job, to our audience, then you've just hopefully given them lots of